So it is 6 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Liquor Control Board. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Thomas Renner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, please join us, Jenny.
These are renewals. The first two, Gumshoe for the first, third restaurant and outside consumption. And why they're all conditional is because they haven't yet received their certificate of fitness. And the same with Monkey. And then for Standing Stones, Lily is here today. Talk about her new restaurant.
Would you like to join us again and chat about your restaurant application?
So far the store has been great, but I think it will be even better if once we have the first class license to serve in two. For that, we need to serve food. So we're planning on selling cheese and making cheese plates and charcuterie, and that's about it to start. We might branch out into some, like a salad of the day or a sandwich of the day. But basically, like the cheeses will be sold retail as well, and you pick which ones you want, bring them up to the counter, we'll charge you a plating fee and bring it to your table. That way you get to choose exactly what you want. So we think it's the most streamlined way for us to do it. And as far as this first class license goes, we're not gonna be open late. At the very latest, I would say maybe in the summer, on the weekends till 11, but that's pushing it too. And we're gonna have flights of wine so people can try things before they buy them. We are also going to do higher end wines at a lower cost, because then you'll still make the same amount per bottle, but the customer will be able to make try better wines, and we'll still be making the same amount of money. So it's a win-win situation for us. That's about it.
All right. Yeah, any questions for Lily? Okay. And no concerns from staff on any of these? Well, wait, do we have anyone online? I need to check first. Are there any questions or comments from members of the public on any of these liquor license applications?
The only thing I'm thinking about is planning ahead. If you intend to have any sidewalk use, timelines for that, you'll want to connect with Jenny
Yes,
for getting an application in for that.
I have talked to Eric Portland about it briefly a few months ago, but I would like to have a sidewalk next time. I think I'll be back to see you again.
Probably.
Just every couple months.
You're all the time.
Okay, hearing no concerns, do I have a motion to approve items A, B, and C?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Thank you. That is the end of our Liquor Control Board agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to send a really quick text message to Counselor Judge. And then I will call the next meeting to order. Okay. I've got 6:05 p.m. I will call to order the Winooski City Council regular meeting. First up is agenda review. Any concerns about the order this evening?
No.
Okay. Next up is public comment. So this is a chance for, if you're here for something that is not on tonight's agenda, you can speak during public comment. If you're here for one of the agenda topics, and you can wait until we reach that, I'll invite public comment for each of the agenda topics. If you're attending by Zoom, you can use the chat or raise hand if you wish to speak for public comment. Oh, Judy, I didn't even see you sneak in.
I don't know how to
You're all set for now. Okay. Okay, seeing no comments online or in the room, we will move to the consent agenda. We have our city council minutes from December 11, accounts payable from December 28, and payroll warrants November 26 to December 9, and December 10 to 23. Any questions, comments about the consent agenda items?
Nope.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Bryn, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. On to council reports. Would you like to kick us off, Aurora?
Sure. All right. Reach back to last year. So on 12/12, Tuesday, we had our most recent meeting of the Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission. At this meeting, the Winooski Library staff and committee presented an update on kind of the stats for the last year and what that has looked like for the library. They highlighted that there has been some really exciting increased usage. There's been a 76.3% increase in in-person visits, as well as a 46% increase in ebook and audiobook circulation. So both virtual and in person, seeing some really high usage. And all this kind of great work and service, there are some extreme challenges that the library staff faces. Winooski ranks last in square footage, which I think we all know, and it also last in collections that it holds, so the number of books and items. The libraries serving similar sizes often average 8 paid staff positions to Winooski's 3, and that leads to these other communities can be open longer, so 43 hours versus Winooski's 34. I'm sure in the community services budget we'll get some more information, and I know that we have a part-time circulation assistant. So just thought these are some helpful things to keep in mind as we're looking at the budget, and I'm sure Ray will have more details. On 12/14, Thursday, we had our bi-monthly Inclusion and Belonging Commission meeting. We had a really in-depth conversation about how the ambassador role to the other commissions is and isn't working. We're still kind of looking at how to put that feedback into action, but some suggestions really included the importance of having ambassadors be voting members to really help empower engagement. Ambassadors were also interested in finding time with or having emails from staff liaisons to catch up on meetings that they miss, both on the months when they have inclusion and belonging meetings instead, and if for some health or other emergency keeps them from attending the meeting that they would normally attend. So just having that additional context and the power to vote, it sounds like they are really hoping that would help ambassadors feel more empowered. So those are the main items there, and I'm sure that with that last one, myself, Jenny, Elaine, and Chair Silver will have some additional information.
All right, thank you. Bryn?
Sure. The Infrastructure Commission met on December 21st. We discussed the walk-bike plan that came to council earlier in December. The chair and vice chair will be getting back to me soon on whether or not they have recommendations for any changes to the draft plan. We discussed additional public comment that was provided ahead of that meeting as well. This month, the Infrastructure Commission will be meeting on the 18th. We anticipate meeting in our regular location up in the community room at the pool, and anticipate the conversation to focus around the La Fountain Dion Street scoping and where we are, where the project team is with scoping that out and next steps. The Airport Commission meeting usually is on the first Wednesday of the month. It has been moved to January 17th, so that will be at 4 p.m. Attend online or in person. Recurring items always include noise exposure map updates and noise complaints, as well as noise mitigation efforts. Their noise exposure map technical advisory group is meeting on January 18th, I believe, and that should be posted to the BTV Sound website. I don't know if there's a link yet to attend online, but I will be following up on that. The Winooski Bridge replacement public hearing will be occurring at the Winooski School District on the 23rd. I'm sure there was more information from the city manager on that. And there currently, as it relates to the bridge replacement, there currently is a public survey out. They're seeking input and feedback to help guide scoping and priorities for design. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. Last month, I was able to join Burlington Mayor Weinberger for a presentation to our state legislators around the priorities we have for state legislation, which we adopted in early December. And we also heard from state legislators there about work they already have underway, a lot of which is focused to address the overdose epidemic, increasing crime and other public safety concerns. Last month's Planning Commission meeting included continued review of our zoning for updates necessary related to the Homes Act. Our zoning administrator presented adjustments to our dimensional standards, like lot size, coverage, setbacks, etc., that would support the act as well as better align with the actual development that's already here on the ground in Winooski. The current standards actually don't match existing development patterns. Also should make 3 and 4 unit buildings more viable. The Planning Commission seems supportive and will continue to dig through those. And the chair, vice chair, myself, our housing initiative director and commission chair and councilor judges liaison will be meeting again to coordinate for the joint commission meetings. Planning Commission has returned to a twice monthly meeting schedule this month. So the 2nd and 4th Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. And Finance Commission is on hiatus while we are focused on budgeting. Thomas.
Nice and short, really. The Downtown Winooski Board hasn't been able to meet for a variation of different reasons. So hopefully next week. That said, Blingo continues as a monthly event. So this month it will be January the 9th at Onion City Chicken and Oyster. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to city updates. Elaine.
City updates for today. Tonight continues our fiscal year 2025 staff budget presentations. Please stick around for the public safety presentation. That will include the police department, fire department, and code enforcement. Feel free to ask questions and provide input on how you think your tax dollars should be spent. For the full schedule of budget meetings and information, please visit winooskivt.gov/FY25. You can also send questions between meetings to budget@winooski.gov. We are hiring a new chief of police. Please take our community survey to help inform the selection process. This anonymous survey is estimated to take 2 minutes to complete. Visit winooskivt.gov/survey to provide feedback. We'll close the survey first thing Friday, so don't delay if you haven't responded yet. Please do, if you haven't responded yet, please do so before then. And only 1 response per person, please. If you're interested in running for a local office, the following terms are up for election on town meeting day, which is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. The terming seats are mayor for a 3-year term, 2 councilors for a 2-year term, that's for city council, 3 school board trustees, and a Champlain Water District Commissioner. Residents must file a consent of candidate form and petition with a minimum of 30 signatures, more are encouraged, by 5 p.m. on Monday, January 29th, 2024. For full details and forms, visit winooskivt.gov/town meeting or stop by, call or email the city clerk's office at 655-6410 or clerk@winooskivt.gov. And note that any legal resident may run for these seats. Per state law, all dogs owned in the city of Winooski must be registered with the city clerk on or before April 1st. And with the new year upon us, now is the perfect time to update your dog licenses. Visit the city clerk's office Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. to complete this process. Please do be sure to have a copy of the dog's current rabies certificate. If you have questions, call or email the city clerk's office at, again, 655-6410 or clerk@winooskibt.gov.
Thank you. We are into our regular items then. First up for discussion is the FY25 staff budget presentations for public safety. I believe Chief Audie will go first. You'll have the honor.
Good evening. I think Paul's going to share his screen for me. Yeah, so once again, thanks for the opportunity to present the FY25 budget. No matter how many of these we do, they're fun, they're nerve-wracking, they're challenging, but also it's a time to reflect, right? And so I just want you to know that we do take that time to, I think all of us as department heads, it's a time to reflect and kind of understand fully what we've done and possibly what we need to do more of. And then I also, because I'm going to talk a lot about staffing in this budget, I want to make clear to you and or any of the staff that may be watching or residents, this isn't a reflection of any of our staff not doing a good job. This is simply about the demands for service, and your part-time staff do a tremendous job of providing service to this community, unlike a lot of other communities. So I just want to make sure that we all understand that this isn't a reflection of any individual or lack of their efforts. So I wanted to be clear with that. So the outline is, who we are, our continued focus, Winooski Fire. This also includes code enforcement. That has since moved to PD. So this will be really focused on fire. And the code enforcement piece is our inspection, the inspection piece. The budget, a look forward, and then obviously questions. Our org chart continues to slowly grow by design. On the left-hand column, that's all part-time employees. That's your part-time emergency response staff, from the battalion chief down to the per diem folks. The fourth block down is one you're going to hear me talk a lot about tonight, is the part-time firefighter, and again, that dwindling number. Not a Winooski specific problem, a local, regional, state, quite frankly, a national problem. We have in the middle column under myself added a part-time fire inspector. We were able to do this with the reorg of code enforcement, and that's already bringing a ton of value to the table as far as our depth and our available resources. Next slide, Paul. I will show this every year. I do the budget. I think it's important for all of us, and this is part of my reflection and hopefully the community's reflection. And this is really where Winooski really shines, in my opinion, with the community risk reduction efforts it does, the investments you've made, the leadership you've provided. And that's around the education, engineering, enforcement, emergency response, and economic incentive. And truly, every day our staff is out getting ahead of the call. We will never get ahead of every call. You'll hear the sirens, you'll see the fire trucks, we'll be doing enforcement, but a huge percentage of our work is ahead of the call or issue. And we all should be very proud of that, and it's an important part of how we do business here in Winooski. Kind of year in review for us. What have we done? And this is July 1, 22 to June 30th of 23. The public building inspections on the right, the lighter blue. 1179. That's a pretty steady number. Emergency response 566. That's up over 100 calls from last year. Our re-inspections is something that I'm calling out this year. We spoke about this last year and trying to understand, how many re-inspections we're having to do. So this is really our first year of being able to pull that data point out. So from here forward, you will see that. And that's as much work as an initial inspection, quite frankly. So it's an important number to keep track of, and really something for the community risk reduction, right? Are we doing everything we can for the property owners, the landlords, the tenants, to understand what they need to do to be compliant? Or helping provide resources for those that need to make corrections. So that's a pretty important number for us to understand tonight, and to look for you all to look forward to, in the community to look forward to in the future. Certainly will be part of our workflow, our work plans. And then building permits, again, that's something we do in conjunction with planning and zoning, our public safety admin. That is quite a bit of work. How does that match up year to year? On the bottom, you're seeing a 3-year run of emergency response on the far left, public building inspections, obviously the re-inspections, and then the building permits. And the purple is this year, so I would again, the numbers are, the data is showing us where our emergency responses are increasing, our public building inspections are increasing, and obviously the re-inspections is a new one. Building permits appear to be pretty stable. If anyone has questions, please jump in as we go through this.
Oh, John, I was wondering, is the re-inspection data from years past lumped in with the 21, 20,
Nope.
and 22 public building inspections?
That is just
Okay.
1 year, a 1 year look.
Okay.
Yep. We haven't tracked it. Our software is fairly new.
Okay.
I say fairly new, we're 2 or 3 years into it, but we're able to now start to, when they go to do a re-inspection, that is a type of inspection that we are calling out.
Okay.
A data point that we all spoke about. There's a great question, I think last year or maybe the year before, of how are we doing that? Are we going back 2 or 3 times? And that will be the next data point of the re-inspections as we dig into it. Is it one additional inspection we're going back? Is it 2, 3, 4, 5 times? How does our enforcement line up with that? So that's a great.
Yeah,
a great
so
question.
in 21 and 22, just public building inspections, I guess what I'm trying to say, should we consider, I'm trying to see kind of how much, we're already seeing this, 2023, there's an increase in building inspections.
Mhm.
Should we be looking at I'm trying to figure out how best to word this, 2021 and 2022, would those kind of be lumped together, building inspections and re-inspections, or are they just the building inspections and you weren't tracking re-inspections under any code?
So that's a question I would have to go back
Okay.
and look. It may have included those all as, an inspection,
Okay,
public building inspection.
yeah,
So if this was 2 years ago, and we may in fact be telling you we did 2,000 and change inspections. Does that make sense?
mm-hmm,
So, now that I'm saying that, that does show in the data. When I looked at this,
okay,
that 2,000 number and change is what we've reflected on, but
okay,
we're able to, with the data now, start to dissect that a little, understand it a little better.
okay, thank you.
And a follow-up question to that, are you able to differentiate what, like categories for what the re-inspections are for?
Possibly. And you'll see some more data on what type of inspections, I think, in this next slide. So I believe we will
Okay.
be able to, we definitely know kind of what buckets we have for inspection types as kind of.
And just thinking
kind
on the housing, so if, in order to try and mitigate some of the re-inspection work, just thinking, and then time and labor that goes into that, if there's more of an educational opportunity
Yep.
with the housing side of things.
There's certainly an education piece. We don't do nearly enough to educate. I say educate. But that's a two-sided coin, right? We used to put out a pre-inspection list, then people would get way ahead of us. And there'd be a change in the law that they weren't aware of.
Oh, yeah.
Smoke detection's a good one. You can go to Lowe's and buy ionization smoke detectors. They're $100 and something a piece. But they're illegal in the state of Vermont. You can buy them because they're protected under the consumer products. But detection here in the state has to be photoelectric type. So you went and spent that money, and now we're telling you got the wrong type. So we were fighting a different battle.
Gotcha.
And something we need to revisit, but it certainly takes resources to be able to do that. So specific to the public building inspections, the 1179 that were listed as initial inspections on the other side, I'll call your attention to the very bottom of this. 845 of those were residential inspections. So that's our residential, just what it says, right? Our rental pieces. Our commercial inspections are up this year. That will continue to grow. We knew that there would be a slow roll in that as we brought on the full-time fire marshal. That's an important part of what we do to support the liquor license issuance, and overall just making sure our commercial, our restaurants, our other businesses are safe. The construction permits, final inspection, closeouts, time of sales are down. I mean, we would know that, right? I mean, the interest rates, the economy, those are down significantly. Property complaints is one we visit every year. 83 this year, that's up 22 from the previous year. And I think that's a lot of, quite frankly, the work you're all doing out as you're in the community, getting people to use the property complaint forms and really access. And that's called out in our work plan this year, our goals to continue to advertise that. It's a huge tool. People can advocate for themselves. We can deal with smaller problems. That isn't a negative number to see go up, in my opinion. That's really a sign of, again, we wish we were ahead of those property complaints all the time. But if we can't, I want to deal with those as quickly as we can for the welfare of those that are having issues. Bryn, hopefully to somewhat of your question, the four bubbles, what types, what buckets of inspections, what percentage of those? On the top left, 44% approximate. These are approximate numbers. I'm just looking through the raw data. 44% of the violations are life safety through the National Fire Protection, NFPA. So those are your smoke detection, your egress, that sorts of thing. Going clockwise, 24% of the violations are electrical in nature. And these can be minor. These could, a lot of what we find is maintenance type issues on the electrical. Winooski used to have electrical inspectors, so for the most part, the electrical pieces are compliant. They're just lack of maintenance. So broken face plates, bulbs not covered, GFI outlets, that sorts of thing. And again, those are through the community risk reduction, we can get ahead of, get somebody put in a GFI outlet instead of having a fire because of water and, shorting circuit and that sort of thing. On the bottom right, 10% of the violations are authority having jurisdiction. Those are issues that just quite don't fit into the, any one code. So the staff is writing those. It may be a violations that is specifically in our ordinance. And then lastly is 22% of the violations are the Vermont rental codes. And I would like to say the Vermont rental codes are changing a bit on how the state does business with those. So this health department will no longer manage the rental code. It's all moved to the Division of Fire Safety. I have some concerns with that and how it relates to, they've assigned 5 people in the Division of Fire Safety to deal with the state. through the Department of Health, if you called about a complaint in Winooski, it immediately came to us. And without having done a ton of homework, initially, the Division of Fire Safety is saying they want all complaints to go to the state, and they'll filter them, review them, and then they'll come to Winooski. That could create some huge delays for us. They're not gonna answer the phone on a Saturday afternoon like we do when you don't have heat. They don't consider that an emergency. I'm sorry, when it's 10 below, that's an emergency. It's certainly going to be here in Winooski, as far as our staff will answer the phone and try to figure out what needs to happen. So, not throwing stones, just something we gotta work through with them. They're just rolling this out. This was through the legislature. I understand they're dealing with many communities that don't have any code enforcement. It's all gonna be reactive, no proactive work. It's all gonna be complaint-based for the state. So we just gotta communicate with them, and I just saw that roll out, I believe the 28th of December of the changes. And they were saying they were rolling it out January 1st, and I saw it on the 28th, so it's on our list. Questions on this? Bryn, does that help answer a little bit of your questions as far as inspection types? Literally, there's hundreds of different types of violations that could happen, so.
Yeah, it was mainly categorizing the re-inspection side of things, so I think this is adequate.
And how it falls into like
Yeah.
fire safety versus Vermont rental code and
Yeah, just thinking of like, there were some changes to the lead legislation and regulations, and how much is falling over into that side of things, and so it was kind of just a categorization. How much of it relates to new legislation? And I know some of these standards are updated all the time, so it is easier said than done to like parse it out.
nope, got it. I just wanted to try to understand.
It sounds like majority are, the majority may be to standards or updated standards, rather than some other, ongoing
Mhm.
issues that can be more easily addressed, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of, I know we're kind of going backwards a little bit, and a lot of the reinspection is being driven by, we're still the supply chain from COVID, workforce shortages. People are truly struggling to get contractors to do the work. So that's really extending, it's putting the majority of people over the 30 days. So we end up with they're able to do part of the work, which we really appreciate, but it's generating a re-inspection. So I don't know how long it will take to kind of get through that, or is it the new normal?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it's good to note, because that isn't something that's reflected on here. Thanks.
Next slide, Paul. So emergency responses, again, 566 is up just over 100 from last year. The biggest increase for us is false alarms. I'm thankful the fire instances are down by about 6 in the community, and fire-related type calls. But our false alarms are way up. So I'm trying to, can't react to just 1 year of data, but it will certainly be interesting to understand. We're out almost, seems like every day now for elevator emergencies. So what does that increase do, right? I mean, if we see this spike next year, and then Paul, if you go to the next slide, we can kind of see that in a graph. So this is 2016-17 to current. The different types of calls that we go on. Again, on the left, our fire instances are down from last year, certainly. There's no spike there. EMS is up, which makes sense. Across the board, regionally, nationally, EMS is off the off the chart as far as their call volumes. So it makes sense that we're feeling the pressure of supporting EMS more. We're being called to support them more. Our service calls are up from last year, and then our false alarms is a big spike, right? And a lot of that, again, is elevator emergencies, false smoke alarms, those sorts of things. So, as we look at, we're going to talk more about buying service, right? Buying coverage as, demands continue to grow, and, what is mutual aid, what is auto aid? On the right, the fire instances, there isn't any community around us that isn't going to come in our time of need, whether it's a fire or, a big event. I relate that to fire. When you start to get into service calls, good intent calls, false alarms, that's really the cost of doing business as a city, right? As we build out, for every building that's built, whether it's, EMS demands, fire demands via service calls or false alarms or PD calls, each one of those facilities, over its lifespan will generate calls. And, again, I don't want to overreact to 1 year of data, but if this continues, this community will understand the build out it's done and the cost that is, right? I mean, we all want grand list growth, but that comes at a cost eventually. The buildings downtown, when they're brand new, didn't generate a lot of calls, right? But as those buildings age, those components age, the usage, everyone's feeling the pressures of the economy, maintenance may be lacking, that will push service calls, false alarms, that sort of thing. So, questions on that information presented? Helpful to kind of see a several year kind of reflection?
Yeah, I found this slide really helpful. I was just wondering if you could kind of define what is a good intent versus a false alarm.
So good intent may be you called because you heard your neighbor's smoke alarm. We get there, there's no longer an alarm going off. There's a good intent. I guess that's the simplest way to put it. A false alarm is we're going to go and your detector's beeping because it needs batteries, or it's end of life and it's beeping, that sort of thing. We do a lot of cooking fire, stovetop fires. Those are considered fires.
Okay.
Those are categorized, and that's all done on a national. These all fall under different national pieces through NIFRS, the National Instant Fire Reporting System.
That makes
It's
sense.
not something we kind of put in a bucket. It's done nationally.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions on that?
I'm curious about the elevators. So if I'm assuming you're getting called because people are getting stuck in elevators, but you're classifying that as a false alarm?
We were just talking about this today in the firehouse, right? Some are categorized as a service call.
Okay.
Some are called as a false alarm. False alarm, someone's hit the call button, it's called 911, it's called downstairs, we go, elevator's working fine, no one's in it. Service call, it may be, the elevator isn't operating correctly. And if someone's stuck in it, it may be the EMS rescue. So again, very specific. There's a couple things that could change it pretty quickly.
Sure, okay. If you were to go to an elevator call that had broken or whatever, and I'm assuming all of the bigger apartment buildings are keeping up with their elevator inspections in town?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of our annual inspection is checking those. Another part on the false alarms, and we'll see this a little bit, is our auto aid that we do to Colchester and the college campus. at St. Mike's. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm just, that explains another part of the spike.
Thank you.
So we do this every year, is the calls by day of the week on the top left, calls by month on the right, and then calls within hour kind of breakdown. And for those not familiar, 0 is kind of midnight for me. And we get past noon or lunch. 1300 is 1 o'clock, 1400 is 2 o'clock. This is just done it's military time. So again, these are interesting trends for me to look at. I wish, whether it's calls by day of the week or calls by month or calls by hour, that there's more significant rises, if you will, because it would help us staff. And again, I believe you would hear from PD. It's fairly consistent for them in years past too. So. It's good to keep our thumb on this and to review this on an annual basis, to watch for those trends. That's a good part about data, right? It does help as far as our staffing and where we want to invest, or where I'd recommend we invest.
I had a question about the chart on the top right. Is that fiscal year?
So this is all July, yes. Any numbers you are seeing are July 1 to June 30th.
So I'm just not quite following the purple line so in theory that would be FY24, right?
No, so this was 22, July 1 of 22 to June 30th of 23. So
Okay, looks like you're missing data for May, June of 23? Is that?
For June.
For June.
oh,
June?
possibly for June, yep.
Okay,
I didn't catch that.
all right.
There's no spike there, I can tell you that when I looked at it. But
Yeah.
no, that's a good point.
Yeah, I just,
Sorry.
that was contributing to my confusion. I was
Okay.
like, is this fiscal year
Nope,
23
sorry.
or fiscal year 24? And then with the drop off, I was like,
Yeah, no, I did
not
not
following.
catch that. Sorry.
okay, thanks.
If no other questions, Paul, next slide, please. So then we get to talk about service demands and really about our staffing. We have for a few years now really looked at our staffing in 3 different blocks. So our daytime staff, which is your fire chief, your fire marshal, your assistant fire marshal, and now our part-time fire inspector. Our public safety admin should be added in this, but not included in the call response, but that position is certainly part of our daytime staff, right? And typically we try to cover Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We've tried several different iterations of how we do that. We've been fortunate that staff understands the need for us to be flexible. It works for me, but I'm in the city by 5:30, certainly by 6 a.m. I'm dressed and on the floor, ready to respond to calls. Why do we try to cover those? Because we know that most of our valued part-time folks are headed to work by 6 a.m. or thinking we're not going to get them to come in unless it's a really big fire. And they're usually not back from their full-time employment till the 6 p.m. hour. Is it right on the button? No, but those are the blocks that we call daytime staffing. The paid on-call staff, which is in red for a reason, this is really where my concern is. And again, this is no reflection on the current paid on-call folks. They do a tremendous job. Our service demands are up. And this is, we rely heavily on them, right? I mean, it's in the bottom, you know, it's 194 calls that the paid on call folks answered during the 6P to 6A hours. But as I sit here tonight, I don't know who's available. We don't have a mechanism, we don't pay them to sign up. If the tones go, and the majority of the time they do, but I don't know if anyone's available. I'm responsible for protecting this city, it's 8,000 people. I don't know if anyone's available tonight, 6 p.m. to 6 a. I hope somebody answers the call. The majority of the time they do. But as our service demands go up, my comfort level in hoping someone answers that call, certainly my comfort level drops tremendously. The weekend duty crew, which is unlike the paid on call, it's the same staff, it's the same paid, part-time folks, but they are signed up. I know through the weekend, for the weekend duty crew, that there's at least 3 people on those hours. They're available, they're committed, they're gonna answer that fire call. I know someone's gonna answer that fire call. That is much different than Monday through Friday, 6P to 6A, when I don't know anyone is gonna answer that call. So that's really the message I'm trying to send with this slide. And there were 7 times we didn't answer a call this last year.
I had a question about the training. So we know for the police department, we need the academy. What type of training is needed to be on-call staff?
Yeah, so if you're coming with no experience, we call it the county class. It's a Chittenden County class. It's done typically by St. Mike's. It's an 80-hour class. That's what we require. It teaches you the very basics. It's not a state certificate, excuse me. It is a local mechanism for us, for area departments. When I say area departments, certainly Colchester participates, St. Mike's, Essex, Underhill, Richmond, Shelburne, they all contribute to providing instructors for this Chittenden County class, so that we can get people the very basic training that they need to, number one, be able to function, and most importantly, be safe in doing so in their said departments. And then each department kind of works through that. So you go and get the county class, which we just started paying for. Previously is 80 hours, and we expected you to go do it on your own. We now pay for those hours, which is a good thing. That's part of the investment we've all made. And then annually, the department requires 72 hours. And so you get that through your Wednesday evenings. There's always the opportunity to go on to state certifications. Those numbers grow tremendously in the 200 plus hours commitments. Those are generally done over 6 to 8 months time frames. We try to catch the local ones. The majority of our folks do pursue that state certification. It's done on their own. We do not pay them for that. That'd be about $3,000, $3,000 a person for Winooski to pay for that. We just simply can't afford it.
And is there an age limit?
18.
Chief, no response. I want to say it was like 4 calls last year and 2 the year before.
Yeah.
So small, but a growing trend.
Yeah, and I don't know specifically what block that would fall under.
That's fair.
And
Those calls were answered. I want to ensure the community, this is just saying Winooski didn't, so that means St. Mike's picked it up. We have mechanisms in place that if we do not respond to the dispatchers downstairs in a certain time, or pop up on the app, on their TV screen, if you will, on their screen, they immediately tone a neighboring department. But we want to, we owe it to others, we owe it to this community to watch that number.
question about the salaries. So for the part-time on-call, is that if they respond, or is that just, since there isn't necessarily a schedule where it's like, I'm on tonight, Thomas is on tomorrow night?
So, number one, you're paid for call. So 1 hour minimum, you're paid for call. If it goes over an hour, then obviously it starts to roll. And then the weekend duty crews are broken into, those are not paid hourly. Those are paid by chunks of, whether it's a full weekend or just a Saturday, Sunday. And you all have made tremendous investments in that. So in 2017, you got like $20 to be on call for the weekend. It's now over $120 that the officer gets. Is it enough? I'm not pretending to say that's enough. That's what, 36 hours of coverage, you do the math. It doesn't add up that much to hours, and these folks are not complaining. But it is part of our retention, right? The one thing we do here is, boy, it's a big commitment. So how do we kind of soften that and make it worth their time? We don't require them to be right at the station, so they're home or available. You can't, go to Williston for dinner. You're really committing to be available for these calls.
Thanks.
Next slide. So again, kind of on the same thread, the challenge of the daytime, and again, no one's complaining, right, including myself. Maintaining a minimum of 3, the chief plus 2 on duty with the demands. We're often at 2 during the daytime just due to time off, vacations, that sorts of thing, those sorts of things. So what does that do? There's days where I'm working on the truck 1 hour. I may be in the short-term rental regulation development, the next few hours. I may be bouncing back and be at council. I enjoy that, but that will be a challenge moving forward for Winooski. And the minimum staffing, we go to Hall Keene's building, a 6-story building. We show up with 3, sometimes 2, sometimes 1. That same call in Burlington will draw 10, 12, 14 firefighters. There's a reason. Safety in numbers. Again, 90% of the time we're fine. We're dealing with a false alarm, those sorts of things. But there's other times, it starts the demand, service demands start to increase those occurrences. Therefore, our risk goes up, and I worry about the safety of the firefighters. It's no fun to pull up in Hawkeen and not know what's going on, or know there's smoke in the building, and be just 2 of you. It is no fun getting in that ladder truck by yourself and trying to navigate through the circle, back up, set up. It's challenges we accept. Again, no one is complaining. It's just a fact of where we are. Other challenges with the daytime, how do we cover that, right? I mean, you have 2 exempt employees, working 94 to 96 hours, a pay period. And as the service demands go up, can we do more hours? Can we be expected to do more hours? That's the question. And and then certainly whether you're exempt or not exempt, we value our part-time on-call staff. They're here Wednesday evenings. So myself, if I want to be here for the paid on-call staff, I'm in the city at 6 a.m. and to be here till 9, we're here at 7 tonight. I've been in the city since 5:30 this morning. And again, no one's complaining. But sustainability we're in a good spot. As as challenging as this sounds, we're in a good spot to be able to finally be talking about sustainability and how do we continue to utilize our part-time staff, retain tremendous staff. We start to look at these very things. Your paid on-call folks, again, we talked about, we don't know if anyone's available. Delayed response from firefighters based outside of Winooski. You'll see through some of our hiring practices, we try to save 5 minutes of the station. You start to get, it's not real scientific, but if you put in an application, we Google Map and see, and I do it 4 different times during the day. So John Audie may say he lives 5 minutes from the station, but when I run that during the 4 o'clock hour, that may go to 8 minutes, 9 minutes. So it starts to get, you're relying on that person, to get here for an emergency. And those times matter. The dwindling numbers are a concern. They have been a concern. We spoke briefly about the demands on the staff as far as the certifications, the trainings. The weekend duty crew, again, declining staff, work-life balance. They all work a full-time job. It amazes me. I did it for years, but it amazes me now being on this side of it. Knowing that they left as I was getting in the city, and sometimes I'll wave to them as they're leaving for their full-time job, and to watch them come in at 6, 7 o'clock at night and work hard training until 9, 10, and you really got to pretty much tell them to go home. That's pretty amazing stuff to watch their dedication and that sort of thing. But the dwindling numbers have affected. They used to be required to do 1 duty weekend a month. Due to dwindling numbers, they now do 1 plus a Saturday or a Sunday to make up for that 4th weekend that we're unable to cover. And then on the bottom, we're just watching this number and how many times are we leaving with 4, 3, 2, or 1? The 4 is kind of level. A 3, 2, 1 firefighter, again, I spoke to, I've been doing this 30 years and there's zero comfort of getting in that tower truck and being the only one trying to operate it with lights and sirens, navigate, talk on the radio. It's not safe. And again, as your calls for demand continue to grow, you got to understand the risk factors with that. Questions on that? And again, it seems daunting, but I sit here telling you that we are in a good spot to be able to be talking about this and to be considering this. Nothing bad has happened. God forbid something bad happens. Because that won't be a fun conversation. So I think I got one more on service demands. Thank you, Paul. This is auto aid received, given, mutual aid. I spoke a little bit on the right-hand side, auto aid received and given. Auto aid is when, you're automatically dispatched or others are automatically dispatched into your community on any call. So like we go to parts of Route 15 and 7, specifically St. Mike's, South Park Drive, because we're the closest fire department. And so that's auto aid that we give. Through the arrangement with St. Mike's and the trial run, we received auto aid 24/7, 248 times during this time period. That's when St. Mike's we were piloting with them, trying to buy their service, if you will, responding into the city. Mutual aid received 16 times that we received mutual aid outside of the St. Mike's and that sort of thing. So Burlington, we had an instance where there was 15 departments in here one morning on Main Street. South Hero, Shelburne, that's part of the broader mutual aid system that came and helped Winooski that morning. We provided mutual aid as far away as Williston 26 times through the year. The majority of that was into Colchester. So they had a bigger incident, they had a house fire that we responded to, that sort of thing. Strategic vision, accomplishments to date. We continue to work with the state. I don't know if I should have listed this as an accomplishment yet, but we certainly have been trying to get plans review here into the city. The accomplishment has been, we've put that notice to them that we want to change in the memorandum of understanding with them, the MOU. We have not had a good line of communication with the Division of Fire Safety in that regard. And the manager and I need to continue to talk about what the next steps are. I think we have a plan in place to kind of move that along. And I suspect you will all be involved in those next steps. The municipal infrastructure, we installed host stations within the existing parking garage. So again, with minimal staffing, how do we create efficiencies and improve safety? If you can imagine going to the parking garage and having to lug a couple 100 feet of hose with you, going 7 stories in the parking garage. Again, pretty daunting, pretty taxing. Don't have enough bodies to get that done. So we installed metal boxes, and there's hose that's dedicated there. And any new parking garages that are built or large structures will have those boxes. Again, it's just an efficiency, safety thing for us. Housing. Obviously, the public hearings on the public building registry. We've done follow-ups with Winooski Housing Authority in regards to the public building registry. A small part for us, again, more for you folks that have been out in the community more, is the increased awareness in the housing quality, minimal housing complaint form. That's paying off in those numbers. Again, it's not a bad thing that we're seeing more numbers, in my opinion. I think that's giving people an avenue to advocate for themselves and to deal with issues that they have going on. Safe, healthy, connected people. We continue to do the part-time recruitment. That's kind of open enrollment, if you will. We did participate this last year in the statewide Make Me a Firefighter recruitment effort. Unfortunately, we did not have any takers on that, because part of our effort was to do an open house. I shouldn't say we didn't have any. We didn't have any new takers on it. We did get a member who had relocated back. And again, the numbers were pretty low across the state as far as what those are. The Knox box, the new e-keys, the security boxes on the building, that's a big thing for us to offer to the properties. Obviously, we hired the part-time fire inspector, and seeing some value in that. We were tackling the standard operating procedures, SOGs. This department, we updated those several years ago, so now we're trying to get into kind of an annual review of those. That's what keeps us compliant, if you will, with federal laws, regulations, employment, how we do business as Winooski grows, what changes. It's just really how the department does business. And then we started to work on the implementation of carrying Narcan. Our inspection staff especially is in houses, several houses a day, is in the community, and we spoke about this being part of the opiate settlement funds. This does require us to become licensed as a first responder, which will further prepare us for further supporting the EMS demands here in the city. Next slide, please. What are our goals moving forward? Obviously, plans review comes up. I put if approved by the state. That's why I say your involvement will be warranted as we move that forward. We are part of creating more housing. Being part of, we're pretty well known as being friendly, problem solvers in the development world. So that's important to me, to us, that we continue to do that. I think it's important as we see our demands go up, service demands, and knowing that there isn't a community around us not dealing with the same issue, to host, internally or locally host a fire EMS delivery model, see what's out there, see what others are doing, and see possibly, where we fit in with others. Again, our demands, I think the city of Burlington will see 2,000 extra calls this year annually. Again, there's reasons for all of us to get to the same table. The housing, the public building, tenant, landlord education, we know we need to do more here. We have history in doing this. It kind of tapered off, if you will. Certainly we didn't do any during COVID. I remember when I first came here, there was a landlord education piece that we did, and there's like 36 people. And then the last one we did, there might have been 6. It's time to revisit that for sure. We're part of the short-term rental regulations. As far as how we're going to do those inspections, that's on the future agenda for you folks. And finalize things with Winooski housing. The infrastructure piece, the ladder, delivery of the ladder, that's going to become pretty challenging. So that was supposed to be April. It's now December of 24. I am cautiously optimistic that we will not see increased over the general kind of repairs, increased repairs on our tower, our current truck. We are having electrical issues. It will be going for some repairs. Those when trucks start to have those types of issues, there's thousands of electrical components, and when you start to have those issues, they're not easy to solve. I was in contact with our dealer today from E1, talking about different options of how to secure, make sure that this doesn't continue to slide, meaning the delivery of the new truck continue to slide out. And again, it's supply chain, it's shortage of workforce shortages, that sort of thing. It's real. If you order a truck today, they're telling you 3 years. Ambulances are 3 years. You used to be able to get those in like 6 months. It's pretty, it's real for sure. If we get to vehicle replacement, I really want to talk about and consider replacing one of our gas vehicles with a electric hybrid or a completely electric vehicle. Safe, healthy, connected people continue the dispatching conversations. It's another vulnerability in this community is not having fire and EMS dispatch together. Quarterly public outreach, that's something that working with the city manager, doing quarterly, kind of get out and talk to folks. We attended one at the high school not too long ago around housing. It was a great meeting. And then, start to really expand upon our community risk assessment and get into the details, and you really start to do that by conducting a community risk assessment. It's a formal document that really You get out and talk to stakeholders, developers, that sort of thing, and start to understand reoccurring events through some of our data, underserved areas, and it really starts to shine a light on what we should be trying to do community use wise.
And the ladder truck, that's under capital, right? The capital budget, ladder truck replacement? Yes.
Well, you did a bond. Yeah. Any questions? What's in this budget? And again, this number's with the combined fire and rental registry. Remind you that the rental registry has been viewed as an enterprise fund. We've talked several years about kind of pulling that together as an essential service. And as far as, the increases in this year's proposed budget is adding a fire captain at night. Gonna be honest, there's not many other fire departments that have a 3 to 11 person. I'm pretty confident we can pull it off as far as recruitment and find the right person, being full-time and benefited. And this would be the first time we'd be really hiring somebody to focus on the fire side and really focus on supporting our part-time folks. So being here these hours would reduce the reliance on us having the daytime folks that are doing 15, 16 hours a day on those Wednesdays, to really focus and support them better than what we're able to do today. And that's really the training program, making sure if there's trainings that folks want to take, coordinating the Wednesday trainings. Those are very coordinated, very scheduled, if you will. Because again, I'm trying to capture a couple hours of someone's time, so we want to be very efficient in that. And it really equates to safety on how well we do our training, really, and our efficiencies. How can we continue to do this with minimal staffing? Is investing in the training and making sure people are efficient and safe in what they're doing. It also, brings the operational continuity when our staff leaves, at 6 p.m. Again, we really don't have a handoff for any of those extra hours. Our part-time folks don't know anything that's happened during the day. A lot of times we don't know what's happened overnight. So it's, it does close that gap by about 45% just by virtue of the hours that person's going to cover. That's where that percentage came from. And then the rental registry is called out as, coming over into this year's budget. And as a reminder, a majority of that is covered on rental registry fees. And then Angela called out the net impact to the taxpayer for that.
I want to raise an issue for you and Elaine. I think first, I think there's some compelling information here about this request to add another position. This is a trend we've been talking about, and I'm pretty sure last year we even said, we should really seriously consider next year. But I want to say that the fire captain is probably a 2% tax rate increase. And as you've shared, with growth and grand list in housing and in units, this is impacting service calls. We had a conversation last year about permitting fees and potentially increasing those, which we had to table. So when we looked at the permit fees for new development, there's 3 tiers of a flat rate. So if you develop up to X property value, it costs something. It was higher for the next level and then higher still. But they were it was sort of like a discounted rate as the developments went bigger. So I think there's an opportunity there to increase those rates so that the permit fee is higher for these larger developments, and then use that revenue to offset these increasing costs. Also, want to make sure that the public safety impact fee hasn't fallen off the priorities to explore. Even if that is only specifically for the tower truck, we saw last meeting that our capital plan is pretty concerning in future years.
Duly noted.
I can follow up with you tomorrow, Elaine, on the permit thing too.
Yeah, and let me know if you want maybe in on that conversation as well too. So, but obviously Eric also is part of that, so. Next slide. So this is our roll-up that you see every year, kind of pulls together, obviously salaries and benefits. You know, a couple of the bigger ones, the vehicle and equipment maintenance is quite a bit rolled up in there. You know, again, I really want to highlight too that we've really made an effort from 2017 to current to right size this department. You know, we went from a 3-truck to a 2-truck set. And you know, a lot of these numbers have stayed pretty stable because of that. You know, number one, we're not replacing a 30-year-old vehicle to the tune of $1 million. We're not putting tires, we're not changing oil, we're not doing fuel, all those sorts of things. You know, right down to our self-contained breathing apparatus, you know, the numbers in which, you know, what's the appropriate number, and that's what I mean by right sizing. You walk into our firehouse, we do not have 10 or 12 extra SCBA packs. You know, they're very expensive to purchase, they're very expensive to maintain, and we've really looked at what needs to be on the trucks, what we can staff, without shortchanging Winooski, but you know, 10 or 12 of those units we let go. And that's what I mean by right sizing, and we've done it with a lot of our equipment. You know, we used to have 2 complete sets of Jaws of Life. You know, again, that has a shelf life. They're about $55,000 a set to replace. And there's no need for Winooski to have 2 of them. We have 1. That's appropriate, what we can staff, what this community can afford to have. And those are just a couple of examples, but what I mean by right sizing the department. So, you know, there's quite a bit rolled up into those numbers. You know, it's not just the tires, the oil, it's, we buy 3 or 4 sets of gear a year, because those have a shelf life, they're only good for 10 years. So no matter if you may have never been into a structure fire in 10 years. That probably wouldn't happen, but the gear's very lightly used here, but once it hits 10 years, I can't use it anymore. It's a federal standard. So there's a constant roll of you know, we don't want to see those spikes. We try to keep it pretty consistent.
Question about, I know this is the, separate from the capital, but I'm gonna ask a capital, budget question. Do you happen to know, or evangelism, what the estimated cost is for the fire department facility improvements to add what's necessary for, dorm, for bunking?
I would be lying to you to say that I know an official number. I mean, I kind of have a number in the back of my head, but again, I think there's some homework to do to realize, you know, do we do a full 2nd floor renovation? That building's designed to go up. That's how it was designed, and do save costs at the time they did not do that second floor in that station. That's gonna be quite a cost, because it then needs an elevator, so there's quite a bit of cost. That station is not sprinklered either, so that's a new standard. Any firehouse that's built has to be sprinklered. There's firehouses, there's been a couple in Vermont where they've lost all of their assets because of fire in the firehouse, not being sprinklered. There are, through the process of doing a space study, having an architect come in and that sort of thing, there may be opportunity for us to capture some existing spaces to, again, right size, and create a couple bunks, make some other improvements, to kind of
Yeah. I guess I'm curious
not
about
take
like,
that big step.
if you had to say, like the ideal would be building out a second floor and having like a full space, for dorm use, additional classroom use, etc. And on the other end, don't worry, I'm getting my point. And on the other end, it being a smaller, like, if we were to take and renovate a smaller amount of space, I'm thinking about like the cost to do that and the ability to have more on-call staff on site and to draw further out than the 8 minutes that we are restricted, our self-imposed eight minutes. Is that renovation cheaper than adding a fire captain?
No. I'm very confident in saying no.
And still a one-time fee versus year-over-year incremental increase in costs with benefits and salaries.
Right. That's a different look at it, for sure. But
Just thinking about like, if we were able to add more on-site space to increase our range of drawing in on-call from outside of the current radius,
Right.
could that help offset the need for an evening night captain?
But what I would say is I still have the problem of how I support that part-time staff. You bring on more part-time staff, there's more support needed. And who does that? I'm gonna go out on the limb and say, I don't have any more hours to give Winooski. You pay me well, but I don't have any more hours in a day to be here.
Sure, just thinking of different models.
Yes, no, it's a
And trying to
great,
think outside of the box of like,
Yep.
are there ways to incrementally meet our needs without using this as, and again, exploring what has the city manager thought about in terms of what are our full range of options to help reduce, to help ensure that our public safety needs are being met while decreasing the impact to our tax base.
We actually started with that first, is getting to the building so that we could draw from a wider shed, but there's the problem, we have a very spindly structure, so to speak. We're the opposite of top-heavy in the fire department, so it's really about supporting them. I went with this proposal because we can support more quickly our current valued members who are already trained, as opposed to waiting until we've built it and then potentially losing folks because of sustainability. They can't sustain the schedule forever. And then once we have them, we would still need to support them, like John was saying.
I believe it will prolong, and I could be wrong with this, right? I don't know, I guess let me say, it will prolong the need for this community to have 24/7 staff. And once you do that, you will have a minimum staffing requirement. It won't be you have just one person in this firehouse. There'll be there'll be employment regulations. Your NFPA codes will kick in, and you will end up with a staff of 2 to 3 full-time employees here 24/7. So, the captain allows us to support this part-time staff, probably recruit more, right? It's gonna allow me to go outside and bring people in. This is trending like a community of Williston. who went through this. It was all volunteer, then it went to paid call. That started to dry up for them. They made improvements to their facility, and that allowed them to have people from outside of Williston come and give time to that community. And it bought them time before they had to do the full-time 24/7.
Yep.
I don't know exactly how that happens, but I mean, history tells me that these investments will prolong how soon this community has to have that type of coverage.
And then for the city manager, do we know if there's like a cart and horse effect with impact fees that the mayor was just asking about? Like, if we do something before exploring the impact fees, does it omit our ability to access impact fees?
I like you asked a precursor to this question. And Christine's draft answer was correct, that it shouldn't affect. We can still consider them, basically.
Yeah. I guess that's just, like with the ladder truck. Like, essentially, I don't know that we're able to use impact fees to help offset the cost of our new tower truck. Sorry, tower truck, not ladder truck.
That's actually what we discussed it for, and when we looked at impact fees related to traffic, we were able to, if we had implemented them, apply them to projects that weren't complete yet.
Mm-hmm.
But can I, specific to fire trucks, I mean, so you have an engine that's 2014. It has a 26-year shelf life, if you will. So your impact fees could immediately start to be put in reserve for that replacement. You know,
Anticipation of the
right?
next.
You know,
Okay.
I would encourage you to think about, you know, if you're trying to do it specifically for those big ticket items with fire, it'd be apparatus, not just the ladder truck. But I mean, you have an engine and a ladder, and then your breathing apparatus are probably your three biggest ticket items, if you will. So
Okay.
it could immediately start to, you know, lessen the impact in the future. As
The
far as,
bigger timing concern was that you can't retroactive it to
Right.
development.
Right. Yep. Okay.
I should actually see if there's any public comment as well, or questions. None from you. Anyone on Zoom, you can use raise hand or chat.
I haven't had to have Angela bail me out yet.
Okay, please proceed.
2 more slides. So, you know, again, the emerging issues, we've spoken mostly about this. You know, the shortages are not Winooski specific. You know, the hiring of staff outside the area, we're limited. You know, we are critically low with the part-time on-call folks. I think listed here 8 applications, 8 to 10 applications. You know, it just, we're trying. And those are a lot of work to kind of go through. Obviously, it's work you got to do. And again, my major concern is just not knowing who's available. You know, and kind of reflect a little bit on kind of the workload that they are pulling. You know, it's, I have one household that's covering 110 to 120 weekend duty hours a month plus calls. That's a lot, and that's you know, we're pretty vulnerable in that. You know, if they decide to buy a house somewhere else, boom, you know, that coverage is gone for us, and I don't have a big pool. You know, the days of fire departments having huge numbers are gone. And if they do have huge numbers, there's a very small core that are, you know, pulling the load. So obviously we need to continue the recruitment efforts, supporting the current model, continue to invest in ways to retain the staff. That is part of what's in this year's budget, minimum wage when staff come on. We've been able to look at the budget and allocate it so it's a $15 minimum start, and then they're incentivized certificates. That's huge. And then obviously, the renovation to the station, and again, knowing that that's gonna trigger some code upgrades as far as the sprinklers, and we just gotta do that homework and understand what that is. And then, next slide, Paul, unless there's questions on this one. Supplemental coverage, there was a very good question of, can we buy coverage? And we really tried with St. Mike's this last year. We were headed down a path where it was kind of incrementally, kind of buying that coverage, if you will, knowing that, they're contractually connected to Colchester. So the thought was to make sure that Colchester didn't feel like they were paying for service here in Winooski. And just, that proved to be very difficult. They're still contractually connected to Colchester, so they're funded through Colchester. But more so is the calls generated in Winooski. Again, not the fires, but the false alarms, the service calls. The students just couldn't academically keep that work sharp, and then be running into the city. Today was 3 calls, so if you think about being a student, trying to do college work, being in class, that's their model. They leave and kind of go on the calls, and then those students are covering the evenings and weekends and holidays. We experienced, for the first time in their history, they experienced, and then we, being Colchester and Winooski, experienced several rolling kind of outages for St. Mike's where no students stayed for the holidays. The latest one was Thanksgiving, where it was like 2 days, just very short notice, no one around, and our communities rely on them, and they again do tremendous work, but it's just a sign of the demands. Again, I've said enough about the Monday through Friday. I think pretty clear there. That's really my concern. And I also added, again, there's a lot that goes on here, and again, no one's complaining, but 6P, again, we do a rotation as chiefs, so every 3rd week I take call, so that if dispatch has a question or the people responding have questions, they're calling. That comes with kind of the job as fire chief, so take me out of the equation is certainly not part of the fire marshal's position or a part-time battalion chief position, to give those types of hours for coverage on a weekly basis. Not being able to really go do a whole lot, knowing that phone could ring. It is part of that, again, demands. I guess the last piece for me is the last 3 and 4. Encourage the community to continue to look at dispatch, talk about, computer-aided dispatch. That would be, that helps. When you have limited resources, it takes a lot of human elements out of decision making. It's kind of automatic. So a call comes in for XY building, and it tells the dispatcher what needs to be sent, and that may be through an agreement that we have in another community. Today, we rely on a human to process that information and try to make that decision, and it puts them in a tough spot some days. And then our per diem staff, which is a model that we use where we hire folks that are already certified from somewhere else. We don't have to worry about them being here for training and that sort of thing. We have them do a set shift. We try to do 3 of those a week to get relief. We've never gotten it to 100%. and we average about 60% of the time being able to do 3 shifts a week. So it's not insignificant, but it's certainly not as high as what we want. And those are usually short term. You know, someone who's saying, boy, I want to buy a house in a year, and they're able to earn this money or whatever they may be trying to do. So it's usually short-lived. It's not a career doing per diem work for sure. With that, I will ask if there's any questions.
Any last questions, folks?
No, I don't think it's a question, but this is the second year I've heard you do this presentation, and just like last year, I just come away feeling that like something has to change for the fire department. That's obviously up to us to make that decision of what that will be, but you know, I think about one of your guys or gals showing up to Keene's Crossing and it literally being one person. I do not have your job. To me, that sounds like that's not safe and shouldn't be allowed, but I guess it is. But you know, as a resident of Winooski, I think some of the minimum things that people expect is that they can pick up the phone, call 911, no matter what the time is, and somebody's going to show up at their house. And it's great if Colchester shows up, it's great if Essex shows up, but when you're paying taxes, you expect that Winooski's going to show up with a crew that's going to be ready to do whatever needs to happen. So I, as always, appreciate your presentation and the challenges that it presents to us.
Thank you.
I'm gonna call a recess before we do PD budget. Elaine, did you want to add anything, or you want to hold? Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Audie.
Thank you.
I've got 7:37. We'll reconvene at 7:42. 5 minutes. We're all back and ready. 7:42. Let's bring this meeting back to order and continue with the police department presentation. Do you want to kick us off, Elaine?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Now we're back in business, back in session. Elaine.
Yes, so note that I notified Justin Huizinga here on November 2nd that he would be appointed interim chief and that he started that role on November 26th, whereas budget development began in early October. So although all of the departmental budgets you're hearing are the city manager's proposal, this year the police department's budget could be considered a bit more so than the others, as compared to if a permanent chief was behind it from the beginning to end. So I just wanted folks to be aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I have with me Lieutenant James Charkelis. We're going to be jumping in and out as we go through this presentation. Try not to jump on each other. And then we'll go from there. So our outline, who we are, our organizational chart. We'll start there. And then a brief overview of the President's Task Force report on 21st century policing. Then we'll get into some statistics, update on school resource officer, our community outreach team, and then we'll hear some Winooski PD community caretaking stories, outreach events. We'll get into the budget, the strategic vision, staffing needs analysis, and then emerging issues. Our organizational chart, police chief, which is vacant right now. That's why James and I are here. We have 2 lieutenants on the police side. Under that, 3 sergeants positions, one of which is vacant, a detective that we have filled, 7 officers position, 1 is vacant, an SRO position, and then 1 on-call part-time officer. On the dispatch side, we have the dispatch supervisor, 3 dispatchers, 1 dispatcher position we just learned today is now going to be vacant, and then 2 on-call dispatchers. Any questions on the chart? Great. So circling back to the President's Task Force report on 21st century policing, this is something that President Obama did back in 2015. to really strengthen community policing and the trust between police departments and communities they served. In that report, they identified these 6 pillars that were kind of the building blocks of building that trust, and that's something that Chief Hebert took to right away and implemented in our department, and kind of gives us the foundation and the building blocks for our strategic plan and how we go about our day-to-day operations. Paul. So, kind of a 5.5-year look at our calls for service and trends that we're looking at as far as numbers. We see a little bit of a decline during the FY 2022 area, and we've kind of held steady since there. Last year, FY 23 calls for service, 6,630 calls for service, compared to FY 20, which was our peak of almost 9,000. Any questions on that?
Do you think you're, for FY '24, trending more towards the recent bars or back to the higher level?
I think we're going to be closer to the recent bars. Yeah, I think we're going to be right around that 65, 6,600 area.
Do you have a sense of what's been bringing calls down in the last few years?
That's a good question. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think that part of the answer is staffing. We've become a very reactive police department just based on staffing levels. When there's sometimes 2 officers on, again, you become very reactionary, and just your calls for service are just the calls for service that come in. You don't have any proactive police work as far as your traffic enforcement, car stops, directed patrols, foot patrols, that kind of stuff. So I think that pushes our numbers down a little bit. I think also, the conversation around police reform and what we're expecting our officers to go to for calls and what we're punching calls for service has gone down. The usage of community outreach team more. I think all that is part of why those numbers are going down.
Yeah, I had a question kind of similar to that. So these do not include the calls that go to the community outreach team?
That's correct.
Okay.
They do not include those calls. Yeah.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, could you remind me when the community outreach team started? What year?
It started, I think it was 2017,
Okay.
the 2017, 2018 window.
All right.
Yep.
I was wondering if that was part of the decrease, but that's interesting. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So it would show if it was a mutual response between us and community outreach.
Okay.
It would show that.
That's helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Paul? So our top 10 calls for service here, traffic-related calls was number 1. Then we get into suspicious events, public assist, agency assist, wellness checks, alarms, domestic disturbances, animal problems, lost property, and noise complaints. Any questions on that? So, outside of those top 10 calls, to go back to why some of our call volume may have dropped, these are some other calls that we go to. Mental health calls, 182, larcenies, 58 overdoses, 35 burglaries, and 13 suicide attempts. With how we're doing police work now, a lot of these calls that we're going on, they take more time too, and they're more than just one officer response call. So if we have 2 officers on, and we're going to any types of these calls can sometimes tie up officers for, hours out of a shift, which again, when your entire staff is tied up on one call for service, you're not generating more calls for service in the proactive area of police work. Overdoses, one thing I'd like to point out, 58 overdoses in FY 23. We can all agree one overdose is too many overdoses, but in FY 24 so far, we're down to 6, and we're trending towards 12 overdoses in FY24 compared to 58 in FY23. So I think that's great. It's a good stat. Questions on that? Paul? So other police work that's taking more time. We've had one of the most successful years in criminal interdiction again this year. We had a great year last year, but these are some numbers that we were able to put together this year, which includes 5 federal indictments. And again, FY24 so far only 6 overdoses to date, and I think that says a lot about the interdiction that we're doing. We're getting this stuff off the street, and also with Narcan becoming more available. I think that's a big part of the overdose thing. So, questions on that? Paul? So, with the perception that violent crime and youth crime is up, some of the things that we've done in-house in response to that is our SRO teamed up with another officer from another agency, and they came up with this youth organized crime team, which is comprised of county members working to slow down the organized crime amongst our youth, specifically related to car thefts. Motor vehicle thefts are up throughout the state, particularly the county. That's one thing we're working on. The ATF has developed a gun violence task force that we have an officer committed to. That's on an on-call basis. So again, using the resources around us and providing resources to that team. And we do now have an officer in the Homeland Security agency that's focusing on narcotics and human trafficking. Any questions on that? Or any questions on statistics before I pass it over to James?
So by an officer on Homeland Security, are you saying you have an officer from Homeland Security, or one of our officers is partnering with them?
Good question. So with that, we have one of our officers is partnering with them and works on an on-call basis that we get reimbursed for when they're spending hours over there. So he fulfills his shift obligations here where he's needed, and when we have an extra person on, or if it's his day off, he goes and works that HSI task force time. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, no more questions? All right. So I'm going to talk about the community caretaking aspects and then strategic vision. That's going to be kind of my section for this budget presentation. So first one we're going to talk about for the community caretaking is the school resource officer, and just a quick background for everyone who's not completely familiar with it, because sometimes I think we take for granted just kind of assuming people know everything about a position. The school resource officer began probably 20 to 30 years ago, where the Winooski School District and the Winooski Police Department partnered, saying this sounds like a good thing to have, where we can have a full-time officer up at the school, embedded at the school, build partnerships and relationships with members of staff, students, families, and DCF, Department of Children and Families, and have that good nexus between the PD and the school. That being said, 20, 30 years is a long time to have the same model. And about 3-ish years ago, don't quote me on it, but about 3 years ago, some discussions were being had throughout the community, within the school, some concerned residents that, hey, maybe it's time to kind of refocus and relook at what the SRO program is, and is it necessary to continue with? And as part of those kind of like ongoing like dialogues, kind of decided that, yes, we still think there's a need for the SRO, but what's that going to look like going forward? And kind of where it's settled, I know nothing's finalized, but where it's kind of settling is kind of like this hybrid of, they're going to call it like a liaison position, where instead of the SRO, the school resource officer, being at the school full-time, having like an office there, walking the hallways all the time, being very present, that the SRO will be more of a reactive or kind of stationed at the PD, but when there's an incident that requires police, they will be the first to go. They will still have those relationships, still be doing the outreach, still doing like DARE safety and the classes, and still having those connections. But it's going to be a little less, I guess, present at the school. So that's kind of like the background of where we're at today. So for fiscal year 25, as Lieutenant Heising has kind of pointed out, there won't be any financial impact for if they do decide to go to this liaison position. But part of it, or part of this, if it does go to the liaison position for the SRO, is that there's going to be like a school safety coach, which is going to be a non-sworn position, so not a police officer that's going to work closely with the SRO. But obviously money kind of drives everything, and from what I'm being told, until there's they can figure out benefits, salaries, and that stuff, it's still kind of in limbo. But that's the direction where I think things are trending as a community and with the school and the PD. So it's still going to be very much an important aspect of what we do going forward, but it's going to look differently. And we've already kind of transitioned, kind of experimenting with some stuff where the SRO is spending a little less time on campus, so maybe like 1 hour a day back at the PD, just kind of getting a feel of like what that could look like going forward. And we already is wearing like a softer uniform, a little less tactical. We've been having like an unmarked cruiser, so trying to, there's already things I think in progress to kind of see it transition a little more off campus, but still very much a viable resource as far as having those connections and partnerships, and not to lose that. Okay, Nick, yep.
Does that shift impact the role? Like, would they be adding some capacity back to regular coverage?
As far as for the PD itself, like patrol?
Yeah.
I would say, yes and no. Obviously they're gonna, whoever's the SRO or the liaison's gonna be responsible to respond to calls too, if they're not at the school full time. They said in a perfect world, it's gonna be, hey, the SRO, school's calling, they're available in real time and they're gonna go up. But the reality is that we can't control when accidents come in, we can't control when domestics come in. And so it's not gonna be as predictable, I guess, the position. Okay. Being honest.
The superintendent the last time we checked in about it, maybe a month ago, it wasn't totally sure how it was gonna play out.
Mm-hmm.
It might be helpful to hear the way he was thinking about it is there's no more unstructured time for the SRO at the school. That's the difference. So the amount of time that they're not actually working on school matters, it's unclear how much that will be. So that will affect how much time they're available for non-school stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to highlight again, that there's no financial changes for FY25 as far as the school's going to be paying the same amount that they already pay for the SRO position, so it won't impact our budget currently. Next slide, please, Paul. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the community outreach team when we're talking about community caretaking. And again, a little background, just in case people don't know what the community outreach team is. It was started back in 2017, 2018-ish timeframe, so probably about like 6-ish years ago. And really, I think the point of the outreach team was to help offset the ever-growing and ever-present mental health issues that we face as police officers, and to provide a more structured, professional, and to be able to provide better services in real time with like boots on the ground mental health clinicians who are coming out to help offset these issues. And then what that also allows is police officers who we're well trained, but not always well trained in everything to allow us to kind of take a back seat and be able to go do more police related incidents, domestics, criminal activity, be more proactive with the traffic work, while the outreach team members are able to deal with the mental health issues. So it's really a good working partnership as far as allowing the residents of Winooski to have, premier mental health services, and also allowing us as law enforcement to focus on what people expect cops to be doing. I like to point out 158 calls for service. That's been going down every year. I'm sure everyone here has seen that trend. It's been going down, and I wanted to kind of like highlight maybe why that's taking place, because it is a really important function of what we do, and I just want to make sure that you understand maybe why this is happening. So for one, I think the program's working. So I think when it first started, we had a ton of individuals who had been maybe repeat callers, had mental health issues, not getting services, and as time has grown and the program has grown, those individuals have now received those services and they don't need to call us all the time anymore. So it's working. So that's a good thing. I think also when it comes to mental health individuals, it's a very transient population. It's a very fluid population. And what was Winooski's issue in maybe 2022 is now South Burlington's issue in 2023. So I think that also kind of helps explain maybe why calls are down a little bit for Winooski specifically. Another thing to take into account is just the longer that we've worked with this team, the more comfortable we've become. And so maybe what was a call to have them come to the scene, 5 years ago, like we know now that, okay, that's not worth a call for them to come here. We will have an offline conversation to say, hey, can you connect with XYZ? Or maybe that's an email. And maybe we're not tracking that as well because, we do everything through a system called Valcor. And if we're not telling dispatch to punch an incident, I'll be honest, if I'm calling someone on my phone, I might not be saying, hey, can you just put an incident to say this? I might just say, hey, they're gonna. So we could maybe be a little bit better about our tracking mechanism too. So I think those factors, along with the pandemic, I'm not gonna lean on that too much because I think we're out of that, but that's still, they weren't immune to it. It lowered the numbers, it just did. But I think that kind of helps explain maybe or paints a better picture of why maybe the calls have kind of gone down throughout the years, but it is a valuable resource. I don't want to lose sight of that. Paul, next slide, please. And this is just the financial aspect. So we pay 7% of the total contribution, and we represent 9% of the calls. So it's pretty close. And again, I think that's maybe not where it's been in the past. It is shrinking, but it's still really good value. So if Winooski was to break away from this model and we were to say, hey, let's have our own in-house mental health clinician worker, now we're looking at, so the way outreach is set right now, it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Friday, so 12 hours of service. For us to have a full-time clinician with benefits and shorter hours, we're not gonna have them work 12-hour shifts. So look at 9 to 5. It's just a really good model for us to have to make sure that we're getting the most, resources available to the people. And again, like if we had only one or two people here, person calls out, who do we have? The outreach team's 5-6 members, and if 1 or 2 are out, we still have 2 or 3 to draw from. So it is a good model. It does help us in many facets, and it's also not just exclusive to the PD. I know the fire department, code enforcement's used outreach, city hall's used outreach. Outreach workers do everything from getting individuals housing, crisis services. They deal with, loved ones, people who've lost loved ones and overdoses to get them services. It's really all-encompassing, and it's been a really good partnership for all the communities within Chittenden County. So just wanted to kind of explain things, because like I said, things do look like they're trending down, and maybe it's a little less important, but it is vital to what we do going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, I guess, a little more, when we kind of get to brag a little about what we do. We respond to, over 6,000 calls for service. Some of them are very basic, but Lieutenant Heisega put together this list of just kind of more outstanding work that was done by the patrol officers in our department. So kind of back to the 21st century policing model, there's a big emphasis on de-escalation, and we just happened to have an individual come to the lobby who was armed with an edged weapon, threatening suicide by cop, which basically is looking to, have us shoot that person because they're despondent in crisis mode. And this officer, who's actually an ICAT instructor, which is kind of like the gold standard for de-escalation for police to kind of follow. It's a lot of verbal skills to make sure that, to de-escalate, I don't know how else to say it. So this individual came to the lobby. The officer was able to use these ICAT tactics and was able to have the individual put the weapon down, put them in protective custody and got them services. So what could have ended, and a justified ending of maybe having to use deadly force ended up being no force used whatsoever and got this person to the hospital safely. So just want to recognize that, and that's a big part of what we do going forward. The next one, as Lieutenant Heising had mentioned, huge spike. Anyone who's reading the media, huge spike in gun violence in Chittenden County, and we're not immune to that. So one of the officers, there was a shooting in a neighboring town. A Winooski officer got to the scene, located the gunshot victim, and provided life-saving measures, applied 2 tourniquets, chest seals, was able to stabilize the individual before rescue was even there, and that individual thankfully lived. So just, kind of like a life-saving moment. And then these next 2 is just really kind of good old-fashioned police work where officers understand criminal trends within the city and understand kind of where the hot spots are. And so the first one was an attempted homicide. It was an attempted murder using a firearm. The officer was listening on the radio, understood who the suspect was, knew where that suspect tends to hang out in Winooski, was able to intersect that individual and apprehend them before that person was able to elude police for a long time or cause any more harm. So just really good kind of police work to understand criminal trends within the city. Second one, same thing. An armed robbery that happened in another town. Again, understood who the individual was, where they tend to kind of hang out in the city, and got into a short pursuit, but ended with apprehending the suspect as well. So just some really good piece of work by the team downstairs. Next slide, please. And not to go into too much, but we go to medical calls all the time along with fire, and usually we're there before rescue just because we're just around. We're 24 hours, full time. So officer performed successful CPR when Winooski Falls Way. And then one of the biggest things, I don't know if you're part of this, but we've added 3 AEDs defibrillators, which, from what I've been told, is the highest success rate for any kind of cardiac event is having an AED at your disposal. So we now have every patrol vehicle that's active. So usually 2, I think we have 3 total, but usually we're gonna have 2 in the cruisers. So anytime we're going to a medical event that we believe CPR might be needed, the first thing we're gonna be doing is putting AEDs on that person. So hopefully we start seeing more successful CPR because of that. And of course, just the multitude of Narcan deployments, de-escalation, and of course outreach team, which we already talked about. So, next slide, please. And then again, just with, I know we've talked about the strategic plan that we have as a PD and our strategic vision, and certainly a big part of that with the 21st Century Policing Model is our outreach that we do. And again, we're gonna try and continue to do it. Our staffing is limited right now, just being honest. So we haven't been as able to perform the coffees with the cops. The public safety camp was a big success for us. I think originally we were going to do like a Citizens Police Academy, but the school resource officer was able to put together a fantastic week for a lot of the children in the school system, and incorporated, he got volunteer vans, I think, from the Army National Guard, EMTs, fire, police. I think even Border Patrol showed up for one of the days. So a lot of just good interaction for these kids during the school year to kind of see what we do, firsthand experience. I think it probably left a good impression on all of them, and certainly made us proud as a PD. But like I said, that's what we do throughout the year, and we're going to continue to do that best we can. But staffing does play into our ability to be out in the community as much as we'd like to be, because when we're trying, patrol is going to be paramount. If we can't staff patrol, I can't ask an officer to do 4 hours, to have coffee with someone just to have a good conversation, which is what we want to see happen. But those are the limitations with our staffing currently. Next slide, please.
Well, actually,
yeah.
on that note,
Yeah.
how much of that is is vacancy based versus, or people on leaves versus like if you had everybody that you should have right now?
Right now we have 12 or 13. We're designated 15. We have 12 right
We have
now.
12 right now.
And that's just where we're at, because no one's
And
technically
that
on the
includes
books anymore.
That includes the SRO and the detective
Mhm.
position, so we're really running patrol with 10
Yeah.
right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these events, I think to answer your question, these events are, it's about a time commitment for our officers. And when we're already asking them to work, overtime to cover shifts, it's really hard to get them to come in to do these extra events that are, equally as important, but it's hard to be everywhere at once.
So now it's kind of just shifting gears a little bit to strategic vision. Again, I think we've already talked about for fiscal year 24, we've already talked about kind of like the school resource officer, so I won't probably go into that too much. We're going to continue, and we have diversified our workforce. I'm proud to say again, I think we mentioned maybe last year a little bit, but a quarter of our workforce is persons of color, which is fantastic. And actually, I guess you could say a third of our workforce currently, because we're down. And we're going to continue to hopefully be able to, through social media platforms and other things, to hopefully reach out to those communities going forward. Lieutenant Huizenga and some of the officers were able to get us some positions or some slots in some career days or career field days. I know we attended one in Norwich recently, so now we have like a little display. Got some like poker chips to hand out that has our a link right to our hiring page for information. So we're hopefully going to be able to connect with more people and diversify and get our recruitment up. We've, like Lieutenant Huizenga said, we promoted one new sergeant. We're going to continue to get specialized training for leadership, whether it be through Roger Williams or the FBI LEADA. Make sure we're doing everything we can to keep us moving forward and making sure we're doing best practices. And then we just sent 2 officers to North Carolina to be trained as instructors for kind of like less lethal. We don't have a lot of less lethal tools right now. We do have the taser and pepper spray, but a lot of neighboring agencies have like pepper ball or bean bags. It's just more stuff that we can use at our disposal to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that things end safely. And the more that we have on our tool belt, the better we're going to be going forward. So hopefully we're going to start getting more people trained with that, getting more equipment to make sure that we have the best tools to make sure that things end peacefully. This next one, there's been a lot of concern with the building downstairs. I think the building's built in the late 60s. And I've been at the PD for 17 years, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, but we've had a lot of people get sick with various types of cancers. And so there was a lot of trepidation, I think, with patrol, I know myself included, just wanted to make sure that the building was safe. So the city allowed us to get a company in and to check for radon, PCBs. We checked the flooring for asbestos, mold. Anything that we think that could contribute to poor health was tested. And it's kind of a mixed bag. We do have asbestos in the flooring, so that's something we got to kind of figure out. And we do have spores like mold in the in the vents that we have to abate at some point. But the PCBs look good, radon look good, but that's something that's kind of been weighing on us for a little bit. So I appreciate that the city was able to accommodate and get us that testing done, so we can at least feel we have a dangerous enough job on the road that the last thing you want to do is come back to the PD and feel like you're breathing in something toxic. So hopefully we can come up with something going forward with renovations that happens. This next thing we talking about like community like forums and stuff with this next one. I just don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know between the two of us, we probably had 3 or 4 community forums where we have multiple concerned residents. If it's a problem house, that we're willing to always come and set up meetings to have discussions. And I can say I think we're 3 for 3 with the 3 we've done it, with having some good outcomes within I think a pretty quick turnaround. So I know we partnered with the fire department for West Allen Street, and that was within days. So continue those conversations going forward.
Yep. And not to jump in on you there
Oh, go
too,
ahead.
but this kind of goes back to the original slide of, police reform and also what our community expects from us as a police agency and a police department. And I think it's important that we continue those conversations and have more of them.
I have attended 2 of those, one by invitation, one because it was on my street. And it is a really good outcome for residents with concerns.
Mhm.
So having the time and taking the time to do that is important.
And we'll continue to always have an open door for that, because it actually makes life easier for us too, because knowing how people feel and really does help us to how we're going to react. So yes, we'll definitely keep that dialogue going between the 2 of us at a minimum. And then this last thing, this is actually good news. So we are back to pre-pandemic numbers for our DUI and traffic enforcement. So it says it's up 165%. That's from like the pandemic years, but we're back to 2018, 2019 fiscal year numbers, you were saying? So that's just really good work by the individuals downstairs to start being more proactive again, getting out and making sure we're keeping the streets safe. Next slide, please.
I had a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yep.
And it's okay, you can change the slide. I had a question, you were talking about additional recruitment efforts. I know the school does some like career days, workforce work fairs. Does the police department participate in those?
That's what we're going to be.
We just barely
Yeah.
went to our first one this
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We're scheduled to go to another one, at least 2 more this spring.
Okay.
So yeah,
Wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've seen, the school post on their social media, having members of the National Guard into the classroom, and, so it seems like at least a really awesome opportunity to partner with the school for career development
Yep.
and opportunities
Yep.
to hopefully recruit from our own graduating students.
Agreed. So yeah, and that actually kind of goes into our next slide with the recruitment. Lieutenant Zenga actually just assigned 2 police officers downstairs as kind of like official recruiters.
Nice.
So hopefully that'll re-energize the position and create more opportunities for us to at least attract hopefully more valuable applicants. And then just kind of return, like we've talked about this, the community outreach back to pre-pandemic. But again, everything kind of comes back to staffing. Again, just like the chief said, we're at minimum staffing right now. 1 person calls out. Now we have to have someone hold over for at least 2, 4, 8 hours. So it's a challenge for us. And that's definitely one of our priorities, I think, going forward, is making sure that we not only recruit but retain who we have, and to do everything we can to keep people energized, healthy, because that's what the residents of Winooski need. Like you said, people pay good money to have good services, and if we're not our best, we can't give you our best. And really it all starts with recruitment and retention. I just can't overstate that enough. So again, Lieutenant Heisenga also just assigned one of the officers as being like a traffic safety liaison officer. So you'll see hopefully we'll be more visible with like some of the federal grants, like the state grants, like the SHARP, like the DUI campaigns, the clicker tickets. Hopefully you start seeing more of that in the coming months. And then the last thing is hopefully getting some renovations for the police department downstairs. And I kind of want to just take a moment on this. This kind of goes back to the recruitment and retention also, and having pride. And our PD, it's not anyone's fault in this building. It's very dated. We're decades behind, I think, our peers throughout the county. If you were just to put us in a vacuum and have 3 people applying to a PD, and you had a blindfold, and you walk into each PD, we're in dead last. And that's just the reality. We're kind of starting off with the wrong foot when we're trying to attract talent. And we want talent. You, as residents, deserve talent. But if you look at the PD just in the vacuum as for what we have, it's a real challenge. So this has to be a priority for us to to make sure that we're keeping up with the South Burlingtons, the Essex departments, the Willistons, even. I mean, every PD, all the major towns in Chittenden County have resources that are just they're able to attract viable candidates. You know, our detention cell doesn't have a bathroom. That's a safety concern. Because people aren't usually happy when they go in handcuffs. And then for us to have to, usually alone, get them out of a handcuff to take them to a bathroom, now they shut the door and we don't know what they're doing in there. You know, they come out, they can take a swing at us. You know, we need things going forward that to not only attract the right people, but to keep us safe. So those will be conversations probably for FY25 and beyond, but we need to have that.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
I agree. I I met with the interim chief and the former chief recently, and I wouldn't want to work down there. So I forget the name of the funds that you get from like when you confiscate stuff.
Asset forfeiture.
Yeah.
Are you able to use the asset forfeiture funds for renovations of the PD?
That is something that the funds do qualify for. Yeah.
We have a bit
I
of a-
forget how much there is in that amount. I don't think it would like give you a brand new police department, but are you considering as well like a partial refurb instead of like
You
doing
need
the
to be
full thing?
careful with those funds. There is a restriction on them that they may be used to supplement, not supplant. So if we're replacing things that already exist, they could be perceived by the federal government as supplanting existing funds.
So we have a bit of a process going. The first step was creating the staff committee to have a say in what happens with the renovations. Then it was the testing. Now we're looking at what it's gonna cost to remediate that and then compare that to desires of what we would renovate. That would be based on some criteria of like what's most important in renovations. So yes, there's possible money we could tap into, but we're not sure yet what we're gonna spend it on. So it's a bit of a process that we're going through to get there.
Okay, no, sure, that's completely understandable. I know, again, we've been talking about the renovations for a little bit too, and I think you've been talking about them since before I came on council, so just wondering if we can start to look into how we can make that a possibility.
Yeah, I think the testing was
Yeah, and to
Be
be
a
fair,
bottleneck
we want to make sure what we're working with is worth keeping, I guess, because if we had PCBs or something that was so catastrophic, you're not going to put several $100,000 into something that, hey, you got to leave anyway. So at least we've cleared that hurdle, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, along those lines, I just think about does that fall into capital improvements?
Yeah, so we have some money set aside there that's sitting there waiting.
Yep.
We can go into asset forfeiture potentially. There's some equipment that the department wants to prioritize, which we want to have a permanent chief to have a say in before we cut too far into that for building versus equipment. So, yes, and it's just, the total amount is a bit amorphous right now, so.
Yeah, to be
We're just
determined.
making our way through that, yeah.
Yeah, just tagging on to Thomas's thoughts of the one-time renovation funds versus recurring funds. It seems reasonable that equipment is a recurring funding need, where the infrastructure side of things there's some maintenance, but refurbishment would be more of a one-time. So if we can pull from unrestricted reserves to do some refurbishments, that seems to feel like that may be a good option to pursue.
Yeah, it just depends on the amount that we're gonna need, so.
Yeah.
We've gotta figure that out first before we decide where we tap into for that.
And I would want to make sure that refurbishing something doesn't fall under the criteria of supplementation that they put on our asset forfeiture. If it's something that already exists, it may not be something that we're eligible to replace using this funds.
And how long will it take to determine that?
It would be something that we need to reach out to our reps for equitable sharing. I wouldn't know how long it would take them to respond. I've never had to reach out to them before. We've only ever used asset forfeiture funds for criminal investigations or training or new equipment.
Doesn't the CIP that was presented to us last month include a line item for the study, like the capital planning?
Yes, so again, the next bottleneck is out of the things that we want and need downstairs, and with the voice of the building committee, what is it that they really want? And what are the criteria? Like that, what they want is necessarily what should be what happens, but at least come up with the criteria that are important to them, and then see what fits into those. So for example, is a toilet more important in the holding cell or new lockers? Like that, I don't need to have an opinion about that, but I wanna know what they think. So if that's,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
my financial question is, can the asset forfeiture be used for that study instead of raising taxes to fund it?
I don't know. We
I
can
don't know
look
either.
back.
We'd have to look into that. Yeah.
Okay.
Back to you, I believe. I think that's it for me on that
Yeah,
one.
unless there's any more questions on that. No? I think this is a slide that you've seen before, with the staffing needs analysis. You know, when you're talking about a full year's worth of work, 2,080 hours, when you factor in sick time, vacation time, injury time, and training that we go to, that number comes around, 1,780. And if you break that down, we run 3 shifts in order to get, 3 officers on at least 2 of the shifts. That comes down to that 16th officer need. So we have 2 officers, that's minimum staffing per the current union bargaining agreement. Again, when we have, a significant call for service that requires 2 officers, that takes up everybody on the shift. If we had the 3 officers on at least 2 of the shifts, that would leave 1 officer to A, respond to calls, and B, also do some of that proactive police work we talked about in the beginning, as far as traffic enforcement, directed patrols, foot patrols, that type of stuff. As far as having that padding for the 3rd officer on, it gives you a little bit more room to stay at that 2 officer minimum shift when somebody calls out sick or something like that, and it cuts down on the overtime.
Coming back to the previous question though, if we actually had our 15 positions filled, would this be a challenge? Like, would there be ongoing overtime? Would you have that capacity for more proactive patrol?
I think so. I think, to answer your question, yes, I think we could do more than what we are doing now. The issue is when you start talking about retirements and people that leave, that keeps bumping you down to the point like now, instead of at, if we were at 16, if we had a retirement and somebody left or somebody was out on sick, instead of being at 14 or 13, we're now down to 12, 11, 10, and it just keeps pushing that number further down. So the goal would be, if we could build up to that 16th position, we wouldn't necessarily go as low as we are right now with that 15th. We'd have that 1 position of padding.
And we were at 16 for the majority of my time here.
It was actually 20 years. There was only 1 other year it was dropped to 15, which
Yep,
was during the
so-
recession.
That's kind of been our standard. So it feels like we're asking for something that's getting us back to the past, not even going forward in some ways.
I think that's a really good distinction that I'm glad that you said, because I don't think that people have understood that.
Yeah, we've been 16.
On the financial side, Angela,
Mhm.
probably. If we have all these officers logging overtime, and in this scenario, they don't need to do that anymore, does that compensate for some of the new salary and benefits cost?
Unfortunately, not right now. We are overexpending the overtime line. We are offsetting it with the savings from the salaries and benefits right now, but it's basically backfilling. The amount we're spending on overtime now is the equivalent of the positions.
That, I might have to have like one-to-one time, but like, I'm not following how we need to increase this full amount into the budget when I'm gonna take that offline. I need to think through that.
The 16th officer was lost in the FY '24 budget when the COLA was so high last fiscal year. In order to afford that, when we had an officer step down, we did not fill that position to be able to fund the high COLA that we
Okay.
had to pay out that was not included in the budget.
That's reminding me that in recent years, Chief Hebert, when we approved bringing it back to 16, it was like not going to have a budget impact because of vacancies. Like, I'll have to dig it up, the memo he wrote us. But what I recall is we went back to 16, but didn't actually increase budget because the goal was just to, because we knew there'd be a vacancy.
Right.
The last time we moved up to 16 officers from 15 officers was when we hired Shauna Crump. And that was funded with a COPS grant. And the way that we have drawn down COPS grant funding historically, the first year is covered 100%, and then we phase in the officer fees into the tax rate over the course of the 3-year grant period.
I think there's also savings when you have people who are at the top of the pay scale who are going to be retiring, myself included, within a few years, and then you bring someone in who's 5 years or less. I think there's always going to be a savings there as well, so it's not always one-to-one.
I guess I'm having a broader concern with the approach, the pivot from where previous budgets anticipated vacancies and worked that into the cost, where now we're raising taxes for a new position when we probably will not have 16, the expense of 16 officers.
We stopped budgeting for vacancy savings the year that no vacancies occurred. Because I had to magically find $50,000 to cover the budgeted vacancy that we had, which was the equivalent of a penny on the tax rate. So we stopped budgeting for vacancy savings because we cannot count that they will occur.
Can I ask some questions? All right, so one of the things I just want to name is that we're seeing an increase in, say, usage in fire, we're seeing an increase in usage in our library, and we're seeing a decrease in usage in PD. So I just want to name that. I want to think about, like, how are we best investing the tax dollars that are being paid? Like, where is that usage? And I appreciate that some of that might be that you're not doing as the proactive, but I might argue too that having, more hours in the library might also be a reduction in crime. So I think I just want to name kind of that in my mind, or even fully staffing our senior center. So I'm just thinking about kind of the departments as a whole. You have the most money, a lot of the others do not, and just kind of the fairness of where that usage of our community is actually kind of showing up in the statistics right now. I think I share the concern with the mayor that it sounds like there's been those consistent vacancies, so I am worried about increasing the tax rate for something that might not happen.
There may have been vacancies, but there were not vacancy savings in the department's bottom line.
Okay, that's helpful to understand, but that to me too doesn't, justify increasing a budget in this way. I I think some of the other things that are coming up for me too is kind of what are some other ways? Like, it sounds like you have that one on-call officer. Are there room for more of those? Especially considering it sounds like some of these vacancies are coming from people on leave, which legally we need to keep those positions filled so they get their benefits. We need to make sure those people are protected. But that those are also, those are positions that are not currently helping you all on patrol. So are there other ways that we can substitute? Again, maybe a slightly less high cost to the tax rate. Because it does look like if we did this without the COPS grant, that is a 1.6% increase to the tax rate, just holding that PD line. And I think that again is kind of concerning compared with kind of the data that we're being shown of where usage is coming up in other departments. The other thing, and this is something I emailed Elaine about, is what happened to the admin support position that we budgeted in FY24, assuming that we would get the regional dispatch. Like, are we carrying, like, is that open position that doesn't have a purpose continuing forward?
Yes, because we don't know when and whether we will need that money.
But we have now that money budgeted from FY24. Even if a position came online in FY25, we have that money already to cover it, right?
Right, but there's also the matter of what we do if it doesn't come online. We still have the same reason, we still have the same issues that caused us to want regional dispatch in the first place, so there'll be expenses associated with trying to address that.
Right.
We're still determining.
So we're
where
banking
is
that money.
Yeah, but where is the, like, what are, like, we're hearing, so one of the issues is that you're saying we need more officers to make sure there's time for administrative tasks. Why not administrative position instead of another officer?
Right, so we'll be preparing more detailed answer to that question
Okay.
offline.
All right.
Which is certainly welcome to come up in another public meeting, just we'll be answering that between meetings.
Sounds good. And I've already asked, like, what are the alternatives considered to a 16th officer? Yeah, I'm just, and I'm also thinking again, like the SRO, like that is another question up in the air where there might be some additional capacity coming online, there might not be. I'm just worried that, we're seeing this ask, but I'm not feeling like I have enough information to feel comfortable being like, this is where I want to see our tax dollars. I want to see this 1% increase, but I'm also seeing this desperate need for fire to have those services, and I want to make sure they get those. And I'm also seeing, again, I brought up the numbers with the library because we are seeing a desperate need there. And those are two other departments that, those are ones that are most closely interacting with our residents along with the PD. I think those, and maybe the city clerk as well. So I'm just really thinking about who are currently serving our residents. And with all due respect, like, I really do appreciate all the work you all are doing. I just want to make sure that, comparing the data with the other departments.
Yeah, it's helpful to hear more information you need to be able to make a sound decision.
I
I
guess
do
one question
want
I
to
would have
flag
follow.
the discussion around the SRO. As the amount of work that position is currently doing with the school district potentially decreases and could allow some capacity to shift back to the city, that could impact the amount of money that the school pays the city for that position. So there still could be a tax impact from that position shifting back to the city as well.
Okay, that's a good reminder. Thank you, Angela.
I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if less calls, from what I understand, you may have had more calls, but I think you were more stretched to respond to those more calls. You continue to be stretched to respond to the calls that you have now, there's less of them, so I'm assuming it's less of a stretch. I don't think it means that you're getting to everything well, or as you would like. Again, no disrespect to you all, we've had this conversation. I've unfortunately had to call y'all to my house because illegal activity that happened on my property. I wasn't happy with the response time. I've heard from other folks who have had stuff, cars broken into, their homes broken into. A good friend of mine reached out recently whose TV was stolen. You guys weren't able to get there to what residents feel is a good time because you don't have enough officers at the moment. So I don't want to say and put it out in public discourse that just because you're receiving less phone calls means that you're getting to those phone calls in a way that people feel safe.
And are you gonna be getting into more detail about the regional dispatch funds and plans in this conversation?
Maybe it's gonna depend a little bit on the permanent chief's position. So, but I'll see what we can develop in the meantime. So I'm not sure about the timeliness for budget, unfortunately.
Can you remind me, is that allocated funds in escrow? Like, is it in an interest-bearing account?
The Chittenden County Public Safety Authority, of which the managers are the board
Okay.
members, recently put it into a CD.
Okay. Just,
Sorry, I had.
yeah.
Well, you're done.
I'm again just trying to think creatively of like, we have limited funds that we can pull from. We have, in some cases, unallocated reserves, some existing funds that might be utilized for some immediate needs, and also some funds that we've put aside for some intentional use that we're waiting to see come to fruition. And we've been waiting for years. There's been a pandemic. There's been changes, many staffing changes, to say the least, among other challenges. So again, I think just trying to think creatively about how we can best utilize the amount of available funds that we have to meet the demands that our community needs.
And I wonder, have we thought or looked at the budgeting of adding an additional part-time police officer to put you guys at 15.5 instead of up at 16?
Yeah, that's something that we currently do recruit for. It's just tough with typically your part-time officers come from other agencies that are already pre-certified, and they're looking to just get more hours, but every agency around us has unlimited overtime hours just because of staffing shortages, so it's easier for them to just stay and work for, overtime hours as opposed to going to a different agency and working part-time hours.
I want to come back to the regional dispatch funding. So to be clear, the original amount that was set aside is sitting in escrow with the group, right?
Yes.
But we are now funding that line item ongoing, and that money is just sitting in our budget unused.
Right.
So if we don't know what we want to do with it related to dispatch issues, that money could offset increase for a public safety role, until we know what we need to do and then have that conversation.
The reason why I'm unusually holding these pots of money, which is not a lean thing to do, which is really what the city needs usually, is because of what the school district is anticipated to do with their tax rate. Normally, I wouldn't. Okay,
No, keep going. It's
because
strategic decision.
I'm anticipating that sooner or later we're going to use all that money. So why would I cut into it now and then the taxpayers would have probably a much bigger impact in a different year?
I understand that strategy, and I have heard disbelief from residents about how much tax rate increase we're considering, and I have not heard a single positive comment about it. Like, given the financial situation that people are facing,
Does anyone else smell smoke?
Yeah.
Yep.
this
I
thing
see
is
it.
Is it this?
No, it came from this way, I thought.
It does look like
I can see it in the
there's-
light.
Yeah, it just came through from this way, I think.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can see the machines, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I smelled a cigarette.
I thought I could hear something.
There's something
from
over
the
here, but,
Oh, good thing Audie's here.
is it coming from the,
No, I think I saw
It's
it
just
come this way.
No, it's just.
there's been a noise over there for a while, but.
We're going to pause our council meeting until further notice.
Thankfully, the fire chief is here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
910, 900.
I think that's just picking up the smoke in the room.
Right.
Did you tone out
Yeah,
fire?
I think the light
in
is.
City Hall?
You
Yeah,
can
'cause it's
see.
like, it's smoky over by Aurora, actually.
I heard something coming from that vent. That's right. And then
It's the first.
Just tear it down.
Oh yeah, I
That's
really
like-
smell it now.
And well, now it smells like not what I was smelling before.
No.
No, I
Now it
smelled
smells
that too.
like plastic.
Yeah.
I'm not a detective, but I do.
In any case,
Somebody bring popcorn?
Smoke, fire smell. Sorry.
I just think that you're hearing strong concerns from us about the proposed tax rate increases and a desire to see some way to offset some of these. Like if we move
understand.
forward the budget that you're recommending, there's gotta be some offset in that, the rate that goes to voters.
Yeah, because I feel like all of these things that are putting forward, and this is considering this community services line, are all items that feel really, really important, and that feel like I want to fund those, and it feels like hard to be like, yes, we really need to fund these, and we're holding this open position. So I think that's where some of my feeling is, like, yes, the tax rate is really high, and I'm just looking through, I was playing around with it, right? And we have to, for level services, have 5 or so %. We're holding a position that doesn't exist, with like the funds for that, so
So the COPS grant, if we decided to explore that route, it's $125,000 over 3 years. You know, all the things we talked about that we can achieve with that 16th officer, as far as community-oriented policing, community outreach, crime prevention, more police officers on the street, officer wellness, as far as less overtime for the current officers that we have now. A little bit more about the COPS grant, Paul, next slide. It has become more competitive than it has been in the past. FY23, 60% of the applying agencies did receive it. I think that's lower than normal. I think more agencies are applying for it. You do have to be at full staff to pull from the grant. Therefore, it can only fund the 16th position. So we would have to be at full staff to pull from it. If you drop below that 16th position in our case, you don't lose the grant, it just gets frozen until you're back up to that 16th spot. At the conclusion of the grant, the city would be committed to remain at that 16th officer position for a 4-year period.
If you reduce the 16th, do they claw back the money?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
If you didn't retain it for the 4-year period, would they?
So I think that
Yes.
4-year, I think it's really a 1-year period, so it's 3 years
Oh,
during the
beyond
course
the-
of the
okay.
grant, and then 1-year period after the grant is over with.
Okay.
And yes, if you don't maintain the 16th officer, they claw back all grants.
Okay.
Are there exceptions?
For the clawing back.
Yeah. Like, I would think that there would be some type of parameters around, under these conditions. Like,
We
it
would
be
have to
interesting
look back
see
at the grant agreements, but they were very clear in the past that you had to maintain for the 1 additional year. So if you had a vacancy, you had to be actively recruiting for it.
And then, because we've received a COPS grant in the past, and there's a 60% rate, like success rate, do we know, do they tend to fund previous awardees?
In my tenure here, we have received 2 COPS grants.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I've never done one, so I'm not sure.
Thanks, Angela.
Yeah. I think I want to name that a 60% chance of receiving a grant in any other department would be amazing. So just like naming the amount of money that is out there for cops versus the amount of money that's, say, out there for community service with, you know, very tiny amounts of money for very, 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 very competitive things. So I do want to name that too, of just thinking about where as we as a city, where can we get funds? What departments can we get more funds for, and what departments are going to really struggle with that, especially as we don't have a grant writer position.
Paul? So FY25, what it includes, this would be with the 16th officer and the contractual required increase in full-time salaries, benefits, line items. Paul? So a snapshot of FY25 with the 16th at the bottom there, and then without the 16th in the last column, what it would look like.
We're not seeing any more smoke up here, right?
No, can't smell it anymore either.
Yeah.
Other than the smell, yeah.
No.
Do you still smell it?
Emerging issues. We have 3 openings, 1 more anticipated retirement in FY25. It currently takes 12 to 18 months to interview, hire, and train a new officer to have that turnaround time to get them solo on the street. This is not exclusive to us. This is everywhere. There is like the fire chief indicated, there's a national shortage as far as the public safety sector on recruiting and hiring. The other issue, Lieutenant Charkalis talked about it, the building, what that looks like going forward. And then career development, preparing our next generation of leaders. We have a very young staff. We've had a lot of turnover in the past 2 years. We're getting younger and younger and younger. So preparing these people for these positions prior to taking the positions, as opposed to putting them in the position and then trying to train them up to the position, I think is a good practice that we've got to look at. And that is it, unless there's any questions on that.
I do just want to really, given that we're like really digging on the 16th position, appreciate the work of the team, and that, you know, I had a chance briefly to sit down with almost the full team when Elaine met with everyone, and just heard a little bit of like the stress or the, I don't know, feeling of like being overtaxed or not supported enough. So I do hear the need for the role.
Well, we appreciate that, and we also appreciate the role that you folks play. As hard as we think it is to sit in this seat, I understand that everybody is coming in front of you with some pretty big asks, and that puts a lot of pressure on you all sitting in those seats, and we appreciate the work that you put in and the time that you put in for trying to figure out what's best for the city. So thank you all for that too.
Thank you. Chief, do we need to go? Okay.
Investigating the attic and that's why I'm just monitoring.
Okay. Were there any questions from folks attending on public?
Also, there's a step down, it's not ADA, so.
Okay. Thank you so much.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let's move on to item B.
Yeah.
That's all we're at. Elaine.
Okay, so
Amongst yourselves.
this is for,
I just got up.
Sorry.
This is in relation to downtown Winooski. For those of you who weren't aware of a related agenda item from the council's December 11th meeting, at my recommendation, downtown Winooski's new executive director asked the city for a $36,000 loan to pay off all of its IRS debt and have some working capital so that it can actually apply for grants and do the things it is otherwise capable of doing. The request was for a 5-year, no-interest loan paid back monthly, and council did approve that. Since that approval, I learned that Vermont municipalities are actually not explicitly empowered by state law to issue direct loans, so therefore we are not allowed to. However, the city attorney did advise that the intent of city council in their December 11th action could be achieved by a prepayment arrangement, and prepayment arrangements would be allowable. A prepayment arrangement is possible because the city provides payments to downtown Winooski annually from sidewalk permit fees and local options taxes. The amount from local options taxes alone has always been much larger than the $36,000 requested. And I am advising council that you rescind your December 11th, 2023 loan approval and approve a prepayment arrangement with downtown Winooski where $36,000 is authorized to be issued tonight and $2,250 be deducted quarterly from our payment as the city to downtown Winooski out of their allotment of the city's local options tax revenue.
Any questions? Nope. Great. Do I have a motion to rescind the loan and approve prepayment as requested, authorizing a check for the requested $36,000 and for our city manager to sign off?
So moved.
Motion by Bryn, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, item C. We are in the new year, so per usual, the city manager annual review process should be completed before town meeting day when there are potential changes on the city council. I've included a memo, just recommending the same process that we've used in years past, and a suggested schedule, which I ran by the city manager. I am looking tonight for approval of the schedule and for someone to volunteer to coordinate.
I think Thomas is ripe for a turn.
It will look very different than it has before. Sure.
I think Councilor Hurd did an excellent job this past
They did do
year.
an excellent job. I am no
It is
Councilor Hurd.
updated. There's a template. You just need to copy the
It's in
template.
SurveyMonkey. We've automated the majority of it.
I have a
Laura
feeling
cleaned up
two
all my
people
mistakes.
had a conversation about this already.
It's your
Just three
turn.
minds think alike.
I move that Thomas takes.
All right, so I think, wait, do I have any concerns about the schedule though?
I think it's standard for what we had last year,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, then do I have a motion to approve the schedule and Deputy Mayor Renner as the implementer?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by
I
Bryn,
figured
second
we
by
should let them
Roche.
do it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Great, we are all set. That's the end of this evening's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Motion by Bryn, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries and meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.